Hello, I'm Adinser. Let's talk about the Restoration Shaman gameplay in the early Legion Alpha. Now, as purely from a healing standpoint, not much has changed. We have most of the spells that we had in Warlords of Draenor, and the gameplay hasn't changed that much. However, we did lose Unleash Life, which was one of the spells that required the most skill from a Shaman player. If you did use it correctly, in basically any situation, you were golden. Now, with that being removed, there does seem to be a global cooldown missing from the gameplay, and that's probably because I got used to the spell and used to using it on cooldown. The only other change when it comes to healing is that our healing stream totem has now 2 charges, and you can mix and match when you want to use 2, when you want to use 1 and wait for the other and stuff like that, because if you use 2 at the same time, they will both heal at the same time. You won't cancel the effect of the first. So that's why I said there's not much change in the healing gameplay. But what does actually change? Well, our DPS changes quite a lot. I shouldn't say change, I should say just it's more streamlined, as with every expansion it's more simple than ever. Really, we only have 4 spells to DPS with, and maybe for a healer that's enough, probably so, but still I think the spec will lack the flexibility from Warlords, Mists and before that, where we had Lava Burst, Fire Elemental Totem, Earth Elemental Totem and Flame Tongue Totem. Now, if you were a good Restore Shaman, you would use those spells every time in arenas, in challenge modes, and even in raids. But now we are left with Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, Flame Shock and Earth Shock. So the only DPS we currently have is the constant low DPS form, which other healers have as well. We don't have the burst damage. Now, of course, that's not a big issue, that's just a small gripe, and I think it will affect PvP a lot more than PvE. Now, where else does the class change? Well, in its utility spells and totems. So they brought back 2 old totems that were like removed in Cataclysm or Mists or something like that. They're really old school. So the first one is the Stone Claw totem, which I don't know if it can be used in any sort of endgame scenario, but it basically taunts everything that's attacking you and forces everything to attack it until it dies. So kind of a neat thing to have as a healer for leveling, I guess, but yeah, outside of that, I don't know what it can be used for. Maybe in some dungeons or something like that. But anyway, the more interesting totem they brought back is the Stone Skin totem. Or it was called that, now it's called Earthen Shield totem. And it basically, when you put it down, it has a radius of 10 yards, and in those 10 yards, every friendly that stays in that range will take less damage. And the way it works is when people get damage and are in the range of the totem, the damage will redirect to the totem until it dies. And it has like 300k HP on level 100, so it scales up. It has a 1 minute cooldown and will most likely be used in raids as a raid cooldown. So yet another raid cooldown that you can actually use with your other raid cooldowns in really astonishing synergy. You can actually use your Spirit Link, the Shield Totem, your 2 Healing Stream Totems, and basically anything else you have, and like no one can die. No matter what comes at you, no one will die for those couple of seconds. And that's probably not a good way to heal. You should always spread out your cooldowns throughout the fight, but anyway, as I said, it has amazing synergy. Now, an even more interesting totem is in the same taunt tier as the shield one, and it's called Ancestral Protection Totem. And what it does, it basically gives a player that is in the range of the totem, and that's 15 yards, it gives them reincarnation if they die. And you might say that that's OP, and maybe it will be. The thing is, it has a 3 minute cooldown, so maybe 1 or 2 times in a fight, and a 15 yard range, so that's kinda small range, and 15 seconds. So you have to predict when people are gonna die, and just place the totem and hope they die. If they die, they reincarnate without using, well, I'm guessing that they don't use up the combat res cooldown of the raid. It's not clearly specified, but I wouldn't think so, since a shaman reincarnation doesn't trigger the cooldown. So if you, for instance, have 2 resto shamans in a raid, then 6 people can die in a fight without using a single combat res, and that's crazy. But yeah, that will be really fun to try out in a raid, and I tried it out in a dungeon. It worked really well, but it almost failed completely because the tank died at the last second of the totem, and I even stopped healing him to just try it out. Luckily he died and he got the res. He told me later, and yeah, that's one of the most interesting spells they put in the game so far. In Legion, of course. Now, outside of those 2 totems, there's only one, I would say, new activatable ability that's of any use, or better said, interesting. And that's Wellspring. That's a level 100 talent, but it shares a tier with Ascendance. So that's kind of annoying. If you want Ascendance, well, you can't have the new cool shiny spell. And by the way, I really think that this spell will replace Ascendance as a mandatory spell. Well, maybe, but in the current build it does a huge amount of healing. Although I forget to use it often, but yeah, it does a huge amount of healing. It's on only a 20-second cooldown, and it's everyone in a cone in front of you. Like, literally the entire raid is gonna get healed if they are in front of you, no matter how far, because it travels like really far away. So that's a new spell. It looks really cool. So that's, I guess, it. The other stuff is the same. You have a lot of passives in the talent tree. That's not particularly interesting, and yeah, all in all, I would say that the gameplay is kind of similar to Warlords. The healing is extremely similar to Warlords. They haven't gone for the whole healing changes like in the previous expansion, because if you remember, every single expansion there's, oh, healing is bad, we need to revamp it, and yeah, you know the rest. But they haven't done this time. If you loved healing in Warlords, you're gonna love it now, and if you hate it, which, to be honest, it wasn't great. It was really slow, really not as fun as Beasts of Pandaria and Mists. Yeah, they were OP, healers were OP, but it was also fun. You could do a lot of shit while moving, while instacasts. You were too powerful for your own good, and it's a game. I don't know why they removed that part of the game. To be awesome, to be powerful, to be... I mean, people could die if you weren't good, of course, because they increased the damage of everything. So you had to heal up everybody, but yeah, the way it is in Warlords isn't even close to being as fun as the one in Mists. And they seem to go that direction. They haven't changed the healing, they just added a couple of spells here and there and made it, like, in some ways more simple by removing a lot of spells, but in other ways more skillful, because they added spells that require a lot of skill to use. And that goes for the reincarnation totem, for the shield totem. It does require some sort of skill, albeit minimal, to pull off reasonably well. And oh yeah, I forgot, there's one more spell that's new, and that's from the artifact. And really, I shouldn't have even mentioned it. It's not that worth mentioning, but yeah, since it's new, so it's like it consumes your healing grain and heals for about, at level 100 it heals like 28k, and if it crits it hits like for 58k. And that's really nothing. It doesn't heal everyone in healing grain, it just heals the people that are gonna get healed by healing grain. So it's like a non-factor. The most it can heal is maybe 10% of a player's HP if it crits, and it's a really placement based. So it requires you to pre-place your healing grain in order to cast the spell that has like 1.5 seconds of casting time. So you cast one spell in order to cast another spell, and that's like 3 seconds with small delay. It's like 3.5 seconds, maybe 4, that you need to cast in order to heal a small radius, a small group of people for a small amount. If the amount were bigger, if it was like 20% of HP, 25% of HP, with all that trouble, I can see it being a really cool spell and adding another skill cap to the gameplay, because you need to precast all that. You need to predict where the raid is gonna be. Will they need healing at that time, like that 4 seconds after? Would you even be required to do that? And yeah. And bear in mind, it's still alpha, so they might change that to be like an awesome heal, but really hard to pull off. And I hope that they do that, because as it is, it's really lackluster. And yeah. So those are my thoughts on the gameplay. It's maybe a bit better than Warlord's gameplay, but still the same, still a lot of the same. And I personally am tired of healing. I healed through the entire expansion, so another expansion with the same sort of healing that I really didn't even like is a deal breaker for me. Maybe the Holy Paladin has some interesting spells, and I'll take a look at that when it comes out, but yeah. All the healers so far aren't for me, I guess. Maybe people liked the gameplay, so they're gonna continue. And yeah, it's really hard to explain because it's a mixed bag of old concepts dating back to vanilla and coming to a mix of Warlords and Mist of Pandaria and now new stuff from Legion. It's really a mix of a couple of different playstyles, and maybe something good comes off of it if they change it a bit, although I think they won't. This seems pretty polished, everything seems to have its place somehow. And the last thing I'm gonna say is that from the experience I had in dungeons in the alpha with this spec, it still is that healer that's gonna have an answer to almost everything. Now before it had an answer to everything, but now it's gonna have an answer to almost everything, almost every situation, with a lot of cooldowns, a lot of spells. The spec itself is above others when it comes to complexity, similar to Druid, and I'm glad at least some classes are keeping some sort of complexity, but that complexity is really a shadow of its former self. So we'll just have to wait and see what Blizz comes up for this spec next, if they actually change it a bit. Not, well, there you have it. Until then, thanks for watching and see ya.